Okay, I want to welcome everyone to episode 2 of Leaders in Conversation with our guest today, Bella Abrams. Today we're going to be talking about big-hearted leadership. We are your hosts. I'm Ken Blackwell, and also with us is Amanda Cookson. And as we said, we have Bella Abrams, who is Director of Information Technology at the University of Sheffield today. So let's get the conversation started. And with that, Amanda, did you want to do the intro, or did you want me to jump into that?
I can do it.
All right, since you know Bella a little longer than I do.
I do. Yeah, I was trying to remember, Bella, when we first met, because we started working together at LearnDirect, and I'm so old now, it could be, is it 10, 15, 20 years? Oh gosh, that does make me feel incredibly old.
I, of
so
course,
Bella...
was a child.
So, Bella, you joined the University of Sheffield as the Director of Information Technology in 2019. You've got 20 years plus experience working in IT in the public and private sector, and you're also a member of the Board of Trustees and the for the Association of Learning Technology. Have I missed anything off that list, Bella?
No, that's me.
No. Awesome. I also want to say a big hi to our audience. We've got, I think, just under 130 people in the Leaders in Conversation Facebook group. And we have 95 people who've got tickets to join us today. So I think more people will be coming on the line as we go. Last week, we had an international audience, so it'd be great if in chat you could put where you're from. And also what I'd be really interested in hearing from you is what you think the biggest challenges facing leaders who want to lead with heart. So for that sort of big-hearted leadership, what's the challenge and the things that might stop us from doing that? So while you are entering that in chat, Bella, for the people who've joined us, who maybe aren't from the UK, who aren't familiar with the University of Sheffield and have no idea what technology delivery in higher education might be about, I wondered if you could step us through the sort of size of your team, the size of the customers you serve, and the key deliverables of your department.
I can. So the University of Sheffield is it's a large, we call it Russell Group University in the UK, which means we're led by research, and we're the research-led university in the city of Sheffield, which is a smallish city in the north of England, right next to the Peak District, which is the reason I've stayed here for so long, because I came as a student just a little bit before Amanda and I met, and I stayed, and I've been a student twice at the university, and then when I started working there in 2019, I was overjoyed to start being an employee of the place as well, because I thought it was lovely. I can see that there's some people from Sheffield as well, so it's a beautiful city, lots of lovely countryside that we're kind of allowed to go into at the moment, which is one of the reasons it's such a lovely place. So the University of Sheffield is about 100 years old. We have 30,000 students and there are 8,000 staff. And we spread all of those people across 5 faculties. We've got 44 academic departments, and we do everything from arts and humanities through to engineering. We also have world-leading advanced manufacturing research. We've got a number of centres across the UK. Big one in Sheffield, where we've got engineering partnerships with Boeing and McLaren and Rolls-Royce. But we've also opened satellite centres in Wales, Derby, Preston, which are all sites of intense manufacturing in the UK, Airbus in Wales, Rolls-Royce Derby, and BAE in Preston. So we're proud of that, because that's kind of how we do our big knowledge exchange with partners and kind of change the approach to manufacturing in the UK. So the university, the customers that I've got are everybody, and what happened, I mean, in COVID, it kind of became a bit more pressing because IT is obviously critical to the delivery of a university in normal times. But when we shifted all of the teaching and learning online and we all moved to remote working, we became more critical than maybe we'd been before. So that's kind of been the last few months for me. And yeah, so that's the University of Sheffield, and that's me.
So, Bella, I think you skipped over a major event here, right?
Yeah.
So we've been teasing this in our promos. As everyone knows, right, the COVID pandemic is hit worldwide. And in March of this year, you and your team over the course of 3 days were able to move, was it 30,000 learners? And 8,000 instructors online within 3 days. People want to know how you did that. How was that accomplished?
Well, my team are a wonderful team, and Amanda did ask me a little bit about them. So we recently rebranded ourselves as IT Services, and they are absolute crackers. And we did start planning for the pandemic a little bit before it happened, but not that much before it happened. But the truth is, what we actually did was swing into action and do a lot of superhuman things in a really short space of time. So, I mean, some of these are kind of fairly technical things, but we did have a lot of the services up and running that people moved on to. We had Google as a video conferencing platform. We had a lot of collaborative tools. We had Blackboard as our online virtual learning environment. And we could broadcast lectures live, but we suddenly went from them being used a little bit to being used by everybody in one go. And on top of that, we also needed VPN access for everybody. And that's one of the big stats that we were so proud of. People could work from home, work remotely often at the university, but not in such large numbers. So one of the big kind of numbers that we did was we took our VPN from the ability to do 400 users concurrently to 4,800 overnight, which was just a fabulous effort on the part of my infrastructure team. Our video call platform, the critical thing that we did there was not the provisioning of it. It was actually enabling people to use it and encouraging them to feel that they knew how to access the tools. And we went from 200 Hangouts a week to 18,000 in 1 week. So we went from 200, I think, on the Friday to 18,000 the Friday afterwards. So it was a big shift. And it was one of the things that I was just saying before we started. I think myself and most of the people that worked in my team at the time have probably blocked out how difficult and challenging that experience was. But now we can bask in the glory of it having gone really, really well. There's a lot of stuff to do to keep it going, and there's a lot of changes that we need to do. But kind of reminding ourselves that what actually we did was that we worked together. There was an incredible amount of communication. We understood and started to talk about what the challenges that the university might face during the period, and starting to kind of knock off everything that we could do to help the university cope with that. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of, is that we focused on our customers and we made sure that they could do what they needed. We also kind of influenced a lot of things as well. I think a lot of the lecturers found the big shift to teaching online massively daunting, and so we brought the idea of a minimum viable product in from software development into teaching and learning online to take the pressure off staff. Having something ready for students was important, but also having something that they were comfortable with in the first instance, and then they could improve once the learning and teaching went online. So that was another thing that we did really well. The other thing, sorry, Ken, the one other thing that we did was it was really stressful, and we were all really worried about getting ill at the same time. And it was, some of it we started in the office, and we kind of put social distancing and hand sanitizer and all of those things, and then we gradually moved away to us all working remotely as well, and modeling the behavior was also a really interesting part of when we went online, everybody felt more comfortable, I think, as well. So yeah, it was a fantastic piece of work.
And so you're touching on the element of scale here, right? And so, to do this for a few users a little bit, fine, everybody can kind of imagine that. There's got to be some specific challenges when you scale this up and you're talking about, tens of thousands of users here. So what is unique about having to operate at that level of scale versus, a handful of users?
Dan and Tom in my team hit on the nub of the issue, which was essentially to rewrite our communications overnight, which was focusing differently on, here is some technology, this is how you use it, and turning it into situational, where are you, what are you doing? What tools might you need to help you do the tasks that you wanted to do? And that was the thing that I thought was a really impressive pivot for us, was kind of moving away from we're a service team, we can help you with the tools, into actually we understand your problems, we know what you need, and we can help you think about building confidence in using those tools. So that was a really, really important change. And I mean, kind of scale's really interesting. You can't communicate with 38,000 people in broadcast emails. You can't do it by putting something on the website. You've got to consider all of the different channels that are open to you. So yeah, writing FAQs, putting things on the website, going to committee meetings, encouraging people to do in different ways, cascading through heads of department, all kinds of things. We kind of attacked it from every angle. So that's how we approached it. And also refining it, knowing that when you'd got something wrong, changing it. And I think that that's something I've learned out of COVID, is sometimes messages don't land at all, and to acknowledge that and then change and think about the messages and the method by which you want to communicate.
So there's a couple interesting themes, and I think you mentioned earlier that shift to customer focus, right? Also the move to leadership rather than follower, I think, right? To start to lead the way there. And, you know, the idea of, you know, sort of continuing revelation, right? Continuing innovation of how do we keep refining what we're doing. So that had to come from somewhere. I mean, did it just happen organically, or was that something that you as the leader were helping to support, encourage, make happen through the team?
It's at the heart of the cultural change that I've been attempting to encourage in my team. I've worked in a number of places. I've worked on failed projects, I've worked on successful projects, I've done things well, I've done things badly. And one of the things that I've learned is trying to do giant things. The analogy that I use a lot with the team is we can't eat an elephant in one go. So you start nibbling on the trunk. And I think that is if there probably is a motto that I've got, it is to be iterative, to be flexible, to don't try and eat the elephant in one go. And I don't know if I was doing that consciously, and I don't know if the team were doing it consciously when we did the pivot, the COVID pivot, but actually it was what happened. We refined our message, we looked at things that were working well, and we encouraged others into working in different ways as well. So it's obviously a theme, maybe not a conscious theme.
Excellent. We got a question in chat about remote teams, and I think you were kind of touching on it already, so maybe we'll go there. And I think it was Jonathan, and I'm furiously scrolling through to try and find Jonathan's excellent question. Maybe
how
Amanda
to lead with
has it.
heart in a world of remote team working.
Yes, that's the question I was looking for.
Yeah.
That's
so yes, how to lead with heart in a world of remote team.
So I'll talk a little bit about my team. There are 200 of them, just shy of 200. We are all, some people are working on campus. We've got a small group of people that are working on campus, but most of us are working in different situations in our houses. And it's the thing that exercises probably the most of my thinking time at the moment, is how I can, like Jonathan asked, how can I lead with heart in the world of remote team working? And the big thing is to understand how I'm feeling, because everybody's in a similar situation to me. I'm at home, I'm tag teaming, working with my partner who works at a competitor university. He's at the University of Leeds. We can't work at the same time because we've got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old would probably be okay left on his own more. The 2-year-old absolutely won't. So we have to balance those things. A huge amount of my team are working like that at the moment. Other members of my team aren't like that. They're living at home on their own, or they've got caring responsibilities or other things. So it's about understanding people's contexts and kind of shaping what we want and how we're going to deliver services to our customers, bearing in mind that we're all in a really similar situation. So there's actually some benefits to that because we all have empathy for how we're feeling at the moment. The big thing is kind of remembering to bring my genuine concern about how my team are doing and actually bring that to bear in the expectations that I have of them, and to be really, really clear that this is not about how many video calls you do a day, or how many emails you answer, or whether you are trying to work in the evening because your kids are in bed, or all of those things. It's absolutely about what it is we are supposed to do. So it's focusing on outputs rather than hours, and to be really, really clear, to give people permission to be able to plan their own work around those outputs and their own personal circumstances in order to do that. And I think that that's the thing that's paying off the most with my team. We have a half-hour meeting every 2 weeks. I give updates on the university, I give updates on the kind of general COVID situation, and I spend most of the time talking about well-being, people looking after themselves and focusing on their own productivity as opposed to their own presenteeism, or kind of working in a normal way. And it's paying real dividends. It's great.
So I think that quite often, in order to look after someone else's well-being, you need to be in a really good place yourself. And when we were discussing kind of dealing with the difficult conversations and challenges in the last episode, our panel kind of talked about how you need to center yourself and be in this really great, stable place first. So Bella, I'm really interested, with such a huge role and at leading at such a large scale. What do you do to kind of look after yourself and manage that self-care?
I'm really lucky. I've got really good friends who I can talk to. I also have colleagues who care about me. I have 2 colleagues in particular who check that I'm okay frequently, and I think that's a really lovely thing for them to do. My partner is brilliant, so I've got really good support mechanism. I also, my secret weapon in all of this is online kickboxing, which I pretty much do every morning. Not for everybody, definitely for me. But I am becoming more and more aware that I'm running out of time for kind of, and it's not something that I do a lot of, is mindfulness or kind of meditative practice. And I wonder whether the exercise, the children, work, and generally trying to kind of get by is maybe taking its toll a little bit. And I do probably need to have a little bit of time for me, but it feels a little bit awkward. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that. And some of the ideas I've been kicking around is just going to the park with a book when nobody else is, or something like that. So I think I'm going to try little things. One of the suggestions I made to the team yesterday, because I'm worried about the amount of time people are spending on video calls, was, is it a one-to-one? Can you do it on the phone? While you're doing that call, can you go for a walk in the park? And I was thinking, take that advice, Abrams. Don't just put it in an email for other people. So that's the type of stuff that I think I maybe need to start doing. I actually am very lucky. The park is just there, so it's not a long walk for me to go into nature.
Oh, brilliant! So yeah, well, we could have tried this whilst there was a walk, but that might have been a bit tricky. And a bit breathy.
That kind of, when people are wandering around, everyone would be feeling sick.
So a lot of what you have talked about has got people at the heart of it, and caring about people and their well-being. And I wondered if you could sort of step us through your leadership philosophy.
Yeah, well, so I prepared a bit about this, because it's not an easy thing to talk about, is one's leadership philosophy. And when I have considered this in the past, the things that always are the itties that I write down are authenticity and integrity. Integrity has become the thing that I've realised that when I see a lack of integrity in others, it makes me feel kind of enraged to my very core. So I deduced from that that's possibly one of my key values, to see it kind of not manifest in other people. And so kind of maintaining my own integrity and being able to speak with honesty and frankness and kind of my own truth, I think, is really important. And authenticity, I think, it kind of follows from that, which is, it's a difficult role that I'm in. I recognise that I have to speak with the voice of the university at times, but I don't have to use necessarily their phrasing, and I can always put my own version of what I'm trying to express to my teams, especially talking about kind of post-COVID for universities is going to be a very difficult environment, and there's going to be some difficult choices for everyone to be made, and authenticity and integrity for myself are really important parts of how I think I'm going to have to deliver difficult messages about budgets and other things to my team. So that I think is really important. I genuinely do care. I think that's the other thing, is that I want my team to be happy, and I want them to enjoy their work, and I want them to feel that they do a good thing. One of the reasons I was so happy to go and work at the University of Sheffield is I really enjoyed being a student there. And I think universities are absolutely wonderful things that are absolutely critical to the economy, to the education of people, for, you know, the love of learning, all of those things. And the fact that I get to do what I'm good at, which is IT, in an educational institution, which I admire and I think is really important, is a really big part of it as well. And if I want to enjoy my work, and I do, then why would I not want my team to enjoy their work as well? So that's why I kind of focus on really kind of wanting people to feel the same way that I do about work. And I think the best bit about that is, thus far, it's worked really well. And I've also experienced being on the other side of it, working for people who don't have the same ethos as me, and it's not very nice. So I think that's the other thing, which is that kind of empathy of what it's like being on the other side. The challenge, though, is when you are concerned about how people feel, and your ethos is one of authenticity, integrity, you can't always make everybody happy. And kind of accepting that's also a really big part of it. Sometimes people are not going to buy into my message, my ethos, and that's okay. But it is when you are more of a kind of empathetic person who does care, and big heart is an interesting way to describe it, but it does mean that the impact of other people not necessarily seeing what you're trying to achieve can possibly impact more than it would if I was more transactional and directorial in my style.
So we've got a question from TJ, who's from Sheffield, who says, you know, his biggest challenge is probably dealing with other people's cynicism and defensiveness, which he seems to think especially is in the tech world there. So how do you deal with not getting back the empathy with not getting back the integrity that you're putting out? How do you deal with that challenge?
In the main, I do get it back, if I'm really honest. I know TJ. Hi, TJ. I think defensiveness and cynicism is less about a style coming in, and probably more about how an individual feels about themselves. I think some cultures can grow up around kind of defensiveness and cynicism. It's back to the point that I was making before. Some cultures in IT kind of are not customer centric, are more kind of, well, we know how the technology works, we should mediate it for the customer. And I think kind of creating a culture that does put the customer first, and does kind of think that there's this synergy of ideas of what a technical team can bring and what the customer can bring to the conversation. Often that breaks down a lot of cynicism and defensiveness. The other thing I think in that space is actually kind of doing what you said you were going to do. So cynicism develops from when people have said, oh, I will do that, or I will sort that, and then that doesn't happen. So I think being consistent, and again, that's back to integrity, following through and kind of saying, and also pointing to it. If someone uses kind of cynicism as oh, you'll never do that, point to the things that you said that you were going to do, and you did, and that often works for me.
Excellent.
There's another great question in the chat, which is from Steve Holloway, who's from Wigan. Hello, Steve. And he says that the biggest challenge he thinks for big-hearted leadership must be balancing your human side. So that's emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, vulnerability, with the need for gravitas and executive presence. And that just makes me smile, the word gravitas and leadership. So I'd really be interested, Bella, in your sort of views about how you balance that, so you're not seen as being soft. And also I think there is something about compassion and women leaders and perception. So yeah, what's your take on that question from Steve?
Steve, I also know Steve. Hi, Steve. I hope you're well in Wigan. Gravitas is a funny thing, especially in a university. It's not the first time that my gravitas or lack of it has been a point made around me in other jobs. I think that universities are based on hierarchy. They're also based on educational awards, so professors, people with PhDs, people who've worked really hard and are clever and intelligent and know their fields really well. I think kind of bringing in emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, and vulnerability, most of those things are good. Especially what I found at the university particularly is I can offset gravitas or other things with technical ability and knowledge about what does and what doesn't work. And often that's not necessarily about tools or other things. It's actually just about how to do change. Back to what I was saying before, kind of not eating the elephant in one go. Universities really want to eat elephants in one go. And actually a lot of the time I find myself saying, no, let's do this little thing first, and then we'll do the next thing, and then we'll do the next thing. So I think gravitas is something I'll maybe get eventually. I am growing out my grey as part of my lockdown chic. But I do also think that actually knowledge, confidence, and reputation kind of bring into those things, and the biggest part of that is doing things well. Again, back to doing what you said you were going to do. So often I'll be in a senior meeting at the university. I'll make a commitment that the team does, and I'll make sure that we follow up on that. And I think that that's a big part about building confidence and in the team and in me.
So let's maybe shift gears a little bit here and start looking ahead and start thinking about, the future, right? And what the climate of work is going to bring out of people. I think, it has the ability to bring out the best in people, perhaps the worst in people. It's certainly people are having to learn some new leadership behaviors. If we think about, what the world might look like post-COVID-19, if there is a post-COVID-19 world, we might be dealing with it continuing. But, in a future world, what are the skills that leaders are going to need to really excel in this future world?
That's an easy one. No. So I thought about that as well. For me, the new skills that people are going to have to focus on are what are usually called soft skills, but they're not soft. So in some senses, it's the same skills that we all needed pre-COVID. We just got a different context, and we have, and like I said earlier, luckily we all went through the same thing at the same time. So we're not in actually the more difficult one, which I think is probably coming, where quite a lot of people will still be working remotely and others will be in more socially distant workplaces. And that I think is going to be a really difficult thing to balance. And actually, it's not about technical skills in that space. It's about being able to understand where individuals are, what barriers they might be facing towards understanding what the problem is and how to solve that problem because of where they are and how their situation might be affecting them. So it's kind of back to that empathy and the consideration of how people might be working. My worry is that there's a tendency for elastic bands to snap back, and we've just gone really stretched out. And when Ken, you were saying before your shelter at home has stopped, are people just going to go back to exactly the same, or are we going to start to think about half of us doing something differently and half of us not? And the people that are going back into the workplace might start to adopt those new norms, and the people that are still working at home might feel that they're getting a different, perhaps worse experience. So that's one of the things. And I think that means that leaders in that space need to encourage people to remember that it's not the same as it was, and that the skills that we all learned while we were working remotely need to carry on, and that they're applicable in all contexts now, and it's still kind of focusing on trying to do things differently. One of the things I did my prep for this session yesterday, and then today I did a load of other stuff, so I'll do it while I'm on the top of my head. I wrote a series of kind of suggested things for my team, because I've been really worrying that people were spending hours and hours and hours and hours on video calls, and we all know how tiring it is to just spend hours and hours. But I also didn't want to say there is a minimum of time that you should spend on a video call. So I kind of wanted some guidelines where people could think about how they're working and think about how that might kind of fit in with my focus on productivity as opposed to hours done. So it's kind of giving people a framework in which to work. And the next thing that I want to do out of that is also for my team to kind of co-create a charter where they make their own kind of guidelines collectively, rather than me kind of going, you must do this or you must do that, because I don't think it's always right for me to kind of push down. So they're the type of things that I think, and what we develop whilst we're still working remotely will need to be refined when we start to work in a more hybrid model, or when we do go back to campus. But starting it now means that we'll remember what we needed when we were all remote, and it'll be a really good kind of framework for us to use as we start to change. A couple of my other peers at different universities in the UK are calling it never normal again. You know, some people have been saying new normal and never normal again, and I think that's never normal again kind of has been washing around my brain a little bit. I'm not sure if it's the right language, but I think it's a real opportunity. We don't have to go back. You know, there's real opportunities to not have 2-3 hour commutes, and that feeling that you get when you're trying to get breakfast for everybody and get out of the house. You know, there's some real benefits to working in the way that we're working now. Maintaining those, but still being able to maintain social contact, and, you know, like the kind of the stroking behaviours that you get from having a nice cuppa with someone that you didn't necessarily know that you were going to meet. All of those things kind of need to come into play when we're thinking about never being normal again.
Well, and it's interesting because unlike I think a lot of other changes that have happened in the world of work, this has just been such a universal experience for everyone. And I think, you know, it has showed the value of inclusivity, right? When we're all doing the same thing. I have sat, you know, pre-COVID on a conference call, you know, being not in the room and feeling, you know, as if I wasn't even really there. You know, there's entire conversations going on. There's tittering over inside jokes or gestures, and I'm hanging on the phone, just, you know, oblivious. And rarely would even someone ask, you know, what I thought, or, you know, ask for input, you know, sort of an afterthought. Oh, anybody on the phone have a thought? And I think that's going to be a challenge for a future hybrid, is how do you build that, right? And I know some clients that I worked with, you know, pre-COVID would actually go so far as to put everybody on a conference call or put everybody on a video chat, even though they were in the office, just so that everyone would be on the same footing. And I think it's an interesting question to think about as we think about how do we lead teams, is how do we maintain some of the good and then take advantage of not having to be so remote.
And I agree. The other thing that I was just thinking as you were speaking, though, is that whilst a lot of us who work in kind of white collar, techie and other roles have had a shared experience, there are loads of other people who it's changed at home because they don't go out and do other things, but actually they've been going into work every day. And some of my teams have been doing that. And I think it's also really important to reflect that they didn't have the same shared experience, even though it felt that, you know, one's bubble was all having the same experience. And that's another thing that I'm really worried about, is that I don't want there to be a divide when we do go back on campus, you know, and when we do start snapping the elastic band back, that, you know, there is a kind of an idea that loads of people can carry on working from home, but actually some of the people won't have the luxury of that, and some of the people will, you know, there will be still a need to kind of put yourself into, still, while we've got COVID washing around, still a dangerous situation, particularly on public transport and other things. So I think that's really important, is to, yes, there was a big collective experience. I think being in lockdown itself was a big collective experience, but it wasn't the same for everybody. And I think that's the other thing, is yes, managing stuff in a hybrid is going to be, we call it meeting hygiene. It's probably not the right way to describe it, but it is the person, and universities are quite structured, so you do tend to have a chair and those type of things. That person needs to remember that there are people working remotely, and to bring people into the conversation. I think that's really important, and other people in the room need to do that. But actually, that's the other thing, is kind of thinking about, when we go beyond that, what stresses people are going to have when we go back into the workplace, and and that's why that charter that I mentioned before is going to be really important, because there's such a broad range of jobs in my team, and I don't want to kind of force one team to feel that they're the have-nots, and another part of my team can kind of merrily carry on at home doing kickboxing in the morning and not commuting. So it's a big challenge.
So Bella, you've been a client of mine for a while. And I think we have agreed that sort of strategy is one of your superpowers. So I would really like just to kind of explore with you, because I know when I talk to other people, sort of that whole strategic thinking is this kind of mystery meat. People find it very, very difficult. And as it's something that you are quite skilled and adept at, what I'm really interested in sort of hearing you talk through is, how do you plan strategies for tens of thousands? How do you plan a strategy in a VUCA world where there is so much uncertainty and we really don't know what's going to happen? And how do you, at the same time as doing all of that, make sure that the people are at the center of what you're sort of planning and doing?
The reason I'm good at it is because I recognise that people are at the centre of it, if I'm really honest, without preempting kind of the point of the conversation. If people weren't at the centre of strategy, I would be, and part of me would quite enjoy it, I would just draw coloured boxes on a picture and talk about how nice it would be for those coloured boxes to, at some point, move on to another piece of paper. And that's the thing about strategy. There's probably some general that quoted something that pretty much says that, I paraphrase. So strategy is a plan to get somewhere. And the only way that you can do that is if other people think it's the right thing to do, and that it actually is achievable. I did something, one of the things I haven't mentioned about my extraordinary team is that not only did we take the whole university online and kind of work really stressfully over a period of time, I upped the ante whilst we were all working remotely, and we rolled out some, we improved the security of access to the University of Sheffield systems at a distance, and they did 12 months of work in 6 weeks. And that's the, I was very pleased with them and been telling people all about it today at the university, so it's at the front of my mind. They are wonderful. It was a very important thing to do, and it was very high risk, so that's why we put 12 months of work into 6 weeks. And the thing, I pushed the team. They told me that they wanted to do this thing, and they knew that it was really important, and they knew that they wanted to do it within a period of time. And I gently asked them to consider whether they could creatively look at doing it faster. And I think that that's the key to it, which is I didn't say, actually, you've only got 6 weeks to do it, you go off and do that. They came back and said, we can do it in 6 weeks. So I think that that's the point, is it's about, strategy is about changing things. It's about having a plan, being able to communicate it to people, being able to communicate and paint a picture of the future and how wonderful it'll be. But if people are not bought into that and don't think it's achievable and can't do it in little bits as well, back to my elephant, then it is just a picture on a page. And that's why people are so important, because everybody on this chat will have worked for someone where they've been told what the strategy is and told to just go off and do it, without kind of saying, oh, that's achievable, or have you thought about doing it in other ways? And I think that's the key thing. Strategy is about being able to paint the vision and then co-creating how to do that with the people that are actually going to deliver that. So that's the thing that is what makes it achievable.
And as you talk about team performance then, so, you know, as you've worked with lots of teams, you know, what are kind of the big things which either block or create a drag on team performance, and if there's a secret sauce that you found, what is that truly allows teams to excel?
Well, I have a word for it now, and that's because I've been working with Amanda. But before I had a word for it, I think that how I would have described it would be that people are frightened about saying if something's not going to work, that they're worried that they're going to be blamed for something going wrong, that they don't feel that they can express when they've got concerns, or that, and now I know, due to Amanda, that that's all about psychological safety. Check me out. So I'm glad that there's a word for it. It's absolutely hammering down outside my house now. I'm sorry if that's too noisy. And I think the big change that I've seen, and I can kind of reflect on it now, that other teams that I've worked in have had different degrees of psychological safety. So some of the best teams that I've worked in, we were given permission to do things in different ways. We could challenge the status quo to a certain extent. And also some of the awful teams that I've worked in were very finger pointy, lots of blame, very difficult environment. So I can now, on reflection, kind of feel that we were not psychologically safe at that point. So, and culture's a really interesting thing, and it can be created over a period of time, but also sometimes you can get a sense of why people are not safe. And that could have been something that happened 20 years ago, or it could have been something that happened the week before. And I think that that's the thing for me that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Why would people not trust each other? Why is it easier to kind of point the finger and blame? And that often is because finger pointing and blame happens elsewhere. So it's a kind of response. So that, I think, is a big drag on team performance. I think top-down kind of hyper control is also I think a lot of organisations, when they're under stress, suddenly turn into kind of wanting to control everything. And I've got I'm aware of that in myself. So kind of if I'm aware that when I'm feeling stressed that I want to know everything, then that's something that other people clearly feel as well, and I think that can be a big drag. But all of it comes down to, and I'm kind of flipping the question to, like, how do you fix all of those things? And a lot of it is kind of acknowledging that it happens, and that people don't trust each other, or they're nervous about getting things wrong. Retrospectives are a brilliant tool for that. I've found them, going back, and they have to be facilitated in a really careful way, so it doesn't turn into well, he didn't do it like that, or she didn't do it like that. So actually kind of considering why things have gone wrong and demonstrating clearly that it's not a blame exercise, it is genuinely about learning. Those are the type of things that kind of overcome that stuff. The thing that I've really considered heavily at the university, and I've done it with the help of Amanda, is kind of understanding that you can't rebuild trust fast. I can't come in and kind of use my leadership style to overcome a culture that's taken years to adapt to be created. And I think that's the big thing that I've learned in the last year or so, is it's a long game. And establishing psychological safety and helping people feel that they can trust people. You can seed lots of stuff, and I've got a program of work that's doing that, but it isn't going to happen overnight. And I think that's the other thing. And again, back to consistency, authenticity, and integrity, that pays dividends, but it is over a period of time.
So Bella, there's a question in the chat that's from Amy Everett, and the time is zipping away. So this needs to be a relatively concise answer. But what she's asking is, what's your best tip on getting other people in leadership roles in your organisation to care about humans and be more people-centred? And how do you sell that way of thinking to others?
I don't know if I do it consciously. I think the way to do it is to live it and to show that it works. It's a difficult thing to convince someone who probably doesn't see value in it to value something until they see the payoff. I'm lucky in that I'm the leader of the team, and I can lead from the front. And I suppose the other thing is kind of looking for other examples about where empathetic, big-hearted leadership pays dividends in other organisations. There are loads of examples, particularly in technology, of kind of top-down, non-people-centric disasters, for want of a better way of putting it. I was reading about the CrossFit have completely imploded because their CEO's gone crackers today, which I was looking at lunchtime thinking, all right. So, you can give people loads of examples about when self-absorbed, kind of narcissistic leadership goes the other way. And you can also give loads of examples of when kind of the more people-centric way of thinking pays dividends. often though, it comes down to values. And I think that if you can distill why someone doesn't consider getting the most out of their team, and getting them to want to come into work as opposed to it being like more of a command and control thing, then maybe you don't have the same values as them, and maybe they just aren't really ever going to see it, and that is something that's probably also worth writing it off when you aren't making any headway as well, because that I've learned as well is trying to do things that someone's never going to change. So hopefully that answered that.
So there are quite a few people. Oh yes, Amy's saying thank you. There are quite a few people who are really interested in this conversation today, and who I think are really keen to have a different approach to leadership. And I think for some of us who are slightly older, that traditional sense that leaders had to have gravitas, it had to be command and control, is shifting. But if you do want to move into that space of leading with heart and to let your compassion shine, what sort of top tips can you give to people? You know, what's something that people could do from tomorrow?
Is listen to what people are saying, genuinely listen. Something wonderful happened again the other day, where a member of my team in a big forum similar to this shared their personal story about their mental health and well-being. And at the start of them saying that, they prefaced it with I'm not sure if this is the right place, and I've been worrying about it, and I'm going to say it anyway. And when they said it, you could almost feel it's difficult on a video chat, but you could see that everyone was really kind of impressed with the fact that that had happened. And what I wanted to do out of that was not to do it on the chat, was not to kind of point to bravery or any of those things in that big group, but we've brought it up at different points. And I have spoken to the individual and kind of given them feedback and said, you know, how great it was that they did that, but also how important it is, and not to feel that it isn't a safe space, but also to kind of reinforce with different other groups of people how important it was that they felt comfortable enough to share that with us, and that type of thing. So I think it's when someone does something brave, acknowledge it. When someone does something that's probably not compassionate or other things, quiet word is also useful as well. So I think it is listening to genuinely what people are saying, and also probably taking other cues as well. If someone isn't talking in a meeting, why not? If someone kind of isn't, if their outputs aren't maybe what they ought to be, think about why that might be, and kind of and pull it out and have those conversations, because it is all about understanding other people and what might be driving them.
So in conversational intelligence, there's a tool or a technique which is called priming for trust. And it's essentially where you share a truth, and then you're sort of setting the tone for everyone else. And I just wondered if you could perhaps think about what it is you do that helps to prime for trust and set that tone. And
I did that with him this morning. I'd forgotten about it, but I shared, I've had a lot of surgery. It's not something I talk about particularly, but in the context of the conversation that I was having, I mentioned that. And again, I think it did exactly as that technique, unconsciously, kind of when you tell someone something about yourself, not in I think you've got to balance it as well. You know, it's not, there are some TV programs where people are constantly sharing their truths and it feels like they're never listening to anyone else. So I think there's, you know, it's appropriate to do it and not necessarily kind of pushing your own view as well in order to do that. But it's a useful conversational tool.
now I know that you use the weather reports at the start of meetings, and I guess a lot of people on the line listening, watching later, won't be aware of that. So do you want to step people through what that is?
So at the beginning of our leadership meeting, everyone goes around and says how they're feeling. And I start, and if I've had a bad week, I'll say so. And if I've had a good week, I'll say so. And we get the, I stole this off Fiona Benoit, who may or may not be on the call. This is not my idea. And what I really liked about it was the honesty that it sets up a meeting, and it works even better. We started it when we were all still in the same office, but it works even better now we're working online. Sometimes people say things that are hard to hear. And sometimes people say things that you know are maybe not their truth, but it also, you can use a lot of cues when they're saying those things to kind of understand where they're at and whether they need any help. And I've definitely used that. It's a big group, it's about 25 people. And I think it's been really useful for cohesiveness and for people to understand where other people are coming from.
Brilliant.
It takes a while though. It's not a quick, it's not a quick activity. Yeah, but it's worth it.
Just looking through the chat then, are there any questions that we have missed? Because we've got sort of 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I think we hit a lot of them, if not directly, sort of maybe a little more tangentially. And of course, if you're listening in now and have a question we haven't hit, please type it in the chat for us.
The only one that we haven't hit was one from TJ, because I think we've talked about culture, which Saul mentioned. But TJ specifically, and I think with the things that are going on at the moment, he's from Barnsley, and he's very interested to hear how leaders can give others a meaningful hand up, particularly in the increasingly powerful and much needed challenge to entrenched racism. So I don't know, Bella, it's a really big topic, but we've not kind of touched on that area. Is there anything you want to talk about that in terms of that equality of opportunity?
Yes. Especially in a university that is as undiverse as ours is. And I think that I have been thinking about the current mood of the country and kind of messaging on social media, and I saw something really interesting on Twitter, which was the idea of offering internships to people, but problem with internships is that they can also be difficult as well. But it was a kind of the idea of using your network to help people who aren't necessarily part of your network already. And that seemed, it was described as a hand up. And I don't know if that's the right term, but I think that's one of the things that I'd really like to do, is to demonstrate that actually there's a lot of opportunity to do loads of different things in a university, particularly in a university IT team. And it's one of the reasons I do stuff like this is the idea that you can talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to on a daily basis, and kind of offer the idea of approaching people and saying, can you do some mentoring? Could you maybe give me some tips? But also the idea, what I like to do, mentoring and helping people is something that's really good, but also introducing other people that can actually probably do a better job of mentoring and other tips. And I think that that's the key to kind of trying to do something that TJ describes, is actually creating lots of little networks where people offer help or ask for help, and then people that are kind of the overlapping links in those networks can move people around and help in multiple ways, as opposed to, oh, I'm going to ask about one thing. And so it's, I think the crux of what I'm saying, probably in quite a confused way, is for everyone to remember that they've got loads of contacts, and that if you're open to having conversations with people about, you know, what they might be able to do, or where they might be able to work, or whether they're worried about doing something, is to kind of open that up and to offer overlapping networks to help people kind of more effectively than just bubbles do. And I think that's the worry about bubbles, is that there's a lot of reinforcement within those bubbles, and it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's spreading that out a bit. That felt a bit incoherent, so I'm sorry.
No, what I got from that was about expanding your networks, because I think that is
offering help. So I think, and that was the thing, which is, you know, offering help to people, because asking is difficult. So if you do have a presence on social media, say, you know, I'm interested in helping people, ask me, instead of, you know, and kind of offering yourself to help make those connections. And then also, if someone does approach you, then thinking about how you can open other doors that are not necessarily for you, but more broadly.
So we've got 3 more questions in the chat. So we'll see if we can do a couple with sort of really quick.
Can I answer the Jeff one? Because Jeff Greenwich, hi Jeff. I hope you're still here. You asked one really early one about minimum viable products and convincing colleagues of the effectiveness. They were really easy to convince because they were really stressed about being able to get everything online at the time. And it's really easy to convince someone that actually doing the most that they can do is acceptable without pushing them too far. It's the idea of minimum viable product and then refining it, and the idea that it doesn't just stop there. You can keep doing things, and that worked really, really well. And I think it's gone on through, there's a learning and teaching committee, and the professor that's in charge of that, I think she's used that as a model to kind of say, just do that bit and then do that bit and then do that bit. And that's something that we're really concerned about for the start of term as well, is having tools that people can use but not forcing them to use it. It's almost having a menu of kind of, and being comfortable to use them as they go through the term. So sorry.
We'll do sort of lightning round here, right? Any tips on how a leader can spot great talent?
That's a difficult one. I think working closely with people and kind of seeing how they respond to different situations is one way to do it. It's not often about technical skill. Technical skill is really important, particularly in really, really complex areas. But it's about balancing technical skill and openness to learn and being responsive to different circumstances, and kind of just seeing how people grow in different situations. That's kind of how I do it. It's more difficult the bigger the team, if I'm honest, but I suppose then the next bit is kind of encouraging others to see that that's the way to spot talent, kind of with the other leaders that I work with. So yeah, it's I really enjoy it. You know, when you can see someone that's just doing really, really well, and when you've kind of given them the opportunity to do more and more, I think that feeling is always a good sign that you've done something right and spotted the right talent.
Awesome. Thank you, Geetha, for that question. Delia's got another one. Thoughts on big-hearted leadership when you do not lead a team? She says, I do a lot of upward management as part of my role, and more aim my model of personal integrity and authenticity at work. Any thoughts around this?
It's really hard, especially kind of when I think if you're already seeing it as managing upwards, then you're probably doing quite a good job. And because that's just another word for influencing and kind of demonstrating what works well. I think a big part of that is about what I was saying before about establishing credibility and that people can trust you. You can say a lot more when you are credible and trustworthy. You can be really quite awkward in the nicest possible way because you've established that you're doing it from a good place. I assume from the question that it's not that they're kind of in a really difficult zone, you know, one where you'd kind of want it to turn into a performance issue, but it is more about influencing other people to think in different ways. And I think that is about kind of demonstrating that you know what you're talking about, and as a result, you can offer advice upwards as well as across and down.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Maybe there's one more really quick one from, who was it? Was Saul here? Gosh, the chat has been filling up, so I missed.
Yeah, I think Steve's asked you,
yes.
Bella, to call out your one superpower that makes you such a human and followable leader.
My one superpower. I really like people. I think I'm really interested in what makes people tick. And I'll pay tribute to my dad for that. My dad is he's Woody Allen-like, not Woody Allen-like for the dodgy reason, but in that he analyzes everything. Sorry, I realised I was walking into a difficult place there. My dad is neurotically analytical of a lot of things, and from a really young age, we talked about why people do things and why what motivates them. And I see that I'm doing that now with my kids. So I think I am genuinely interested in why people are like they are, and I get that from my dad. So that's my superpower. And it's his superpower that I've nicked.
Gorgeous.
Awesome. So Bella, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. If someone wanted to follow up with you, if they wanted to connect with you, say on social media, where should we direct them?
I know we're on Facebook, but I've eschewed Facebook. Gives me the rage. So Twitter is the best place to find me. Bella Abrams IT I'm at Bella Abrams IT on Twitter. I am on LinkedIn, but people try to sell me lots of things on LinkedIn, so Twitter is probably better. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we will look for you there on Twitter. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Bella, for joining us today. And thank you everyone who listened, who added a comment, added a question. Thank you for being part of the conversation as well. Thanks to my co-host, Amanda Cookson. And next week, we are going to be exploring the theme of finding your voice and owning your space with Penny Lee. Penny is the creative director and brand strategist who works with kick-ass women in business. Penny will talk about her approach to finding your true voice and share how connecting your story with what's really important to you can give you amazing insights and strengths. Penny's current mission is promoting the importance of finding your niche and how owning your own space is important for both happiness and business. So heads up, it's going to be some colorful language next week. So, maybe send the kids off. We don't know. We don't know. It's not a promise, but it may be.
Just swear.
I swear a lot. Sorry, I didn't swear today.
You didn't swear. No, Penny will swear.
Awesome. So great. So thank you, Bella, for being here.
Bella.
And we will look forward to seeing you perhaps on Twitter. All right. Thanks. Take care, everyone.